The greatest gift you can leave your children isn't an inheritance, it's teaching them how to build one for themselves. 3 years. That is all it would take to completely change the financial future of your family. Hey guys, welcome back to the Law of Attraction Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Keith. And today I want to talk to you about the 3 things that I wish I had known about money when I was 18. So I realized something. I spent almost 20 years learning manifestation, but nobody ever taught me what to actually do once the money manifests. Manifestation can help you manifest money and create wealth, but investing is how you keep it and how you can keep it and grow it for generations, not just for yourself, but for your family. And so today I want to share the 3 biggest money lessons that I wish I had learned really back in school, like before I was 18, before I got into the real world, that I had to figure out on my own. And my daughter, Alexis, is 17, so she's getting there, and I'm trying to talk to her about all of these things. And I figured everyone should know about this. This is something that literally everyone should know, just basic things that we aren't taught. In fact, we're conditioned to not talk about money. We're made to feel like talking about money is taboo, or it's not polite, like rude even. Or, if we do talk about it, then that means we're a shallow, materialistic, greedy person. These are all things that are conditioned subconsciously from a very young age. So we go through our schooling years and we learn all kinds of math, numbers. We learn trigonometry and calculus that we literally never use again in our life. But we're not taught a damn thing about money, about how to create wealth, how to invest. And even in college, like I went to college for business. And so I took quite a few finance classes. And even in those classes, we learned all about P&L for companies, but we learned nothing about managing our own finances. Nothing. The only thing that I remember that was mentioned, and this was not in the curriculum, by the way, this was just kind of an off the cuff thing that one of the professors said was that if we invest $200 a month into a Roth IRA from the time we graduate to the time we retire, we'll have about $2 million for retirement. That's literally the only thing that I was taught about personal finances. But even then, he didn't explain how to invest it. Like, okay, once it's in the Roth, what do you do? How do you even open a Roth? And then when the money's in there, does it just sit there? What do you invest it in? Like who knows, right? It's like one big secret that only the select few understand, or at least that's the way it's always been presented to me. And I think for women, the conditioning goes even further. We see all the finance bros and like the Wolf of Wall Street types, and it can be really intimidating when you don't really have a lot to go off of. And it's implied that we shouldn't trust ourselves to invest because we don't know what we're doing. So we should hand over our trust to someone else. And it's just ridiculous. It's like we have got to change this as a whole, like as a society. And so that's why I just took it upon myself to figure it out and to teach my kids differently so we can break this cycle once and for all. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was Maria Went was on someone's podcast, and I love her. Like she is a very, very smart businesswoman, super successful, but my jaw hit the freaking floor because on this podcast, she was saying how, she doesn't really know about investing, and that's like a goal of hers, and how she has like $1 million just sitting in a checking account. And that floored me, which I'm not saying anything bad about her, by the way. Like I absolutely love her, and I love that she could publicly admit this and say she wants to work on it. But it just showed me that like even the people who are super successful and wealthy don't necessarily understand how to keep it, how to hold it, how to grow it for their kids and for future generations. And when I started to figure things out for myself over the years, I realized it's really not that hard. Like it really isn't. There's so many lies we've been conditioned to believe that make us fearful around money and finances. Most of us grew up with some type of negative framework for money and wealth. And it's really not that scary, and it's really not that hard. Like literally anybody listening can do this. I am explaining it to my daughter and she can grasp it. Like everyone can grasp it. And we should be taught this in school, but we're not. And if it ever gets into the curriculum, it'll be years and years and years in the future, and they're never going to teach what you actually need to know. Okay. So I've just like come to accept that. So rather than fighting that, I figured I'm going to take responsibility for teaching myself and teaching my kids and teaching all of you guys too. So as I learned this and as I'm trying to explain it to Alexis, I'm like, if I would have known this 20 years ago, I would be set for life, literally set for life. And I'm not saying like from my business, I'm saying just with an average salary. If I would have started when I was, first got my first full-time job, things would be so different financially in my life right now. And it's not that it's bad, it's just you realize how much better it could be, how much more that money could have grown. So I'm going to go through 3 basic things. And if we learn this, not only are we helping ourselves with the next 20 years, but we're setting our kids and even our grandkids up for financial security and generational wealth. And I used to think generational wealth, you think of like the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. Yes, that is like an extreme example, but it is not extreme for you to build generational wealth. Like you literally do not have to be a millionaire. You don't have to even have like a big, huge salary or anything like that. Just any average person with an average salary can play their cards right and do some simple steps and do this for their family. So that's what I want to teach you today, starting with the first lesson. So I grew up, and I'm sure you did too, because it's not just from your parents, it's just like society in general, this conditioning. I grew up thinking that the stock market is gambling. It's risky. And yeah, you can gain, but you can also lose everything. This is what I was taught. And so it made me scared of it. I avoided it. I thought like, I'm not smart enough to handle this and I don't want to lose everything, right? And you don't lose everything if you keep it in the bank, So I was taught to save my pennies, like literally to this day. That is what my dad says, save your pennies. And that's been my mindset. So I've always been not a big spender, but a big saver, like a hoarder of money, and hoarding it in a bank account where it's getting little to no interest. Like you actually lose a lot of money over time if it's sitting in a bank account because of inflation. And I mean, just look at your money now and what it gets you versus pre-COVID. It's like night and day how much the prices of everything have gone up and how little your money is getting you now versus, 6, 7 years ago. So to put this into perspective, let's say your grandma put $10,000 under a mattress in 1976. That $10,000, first of all, back in 1976, that would be like the equivalent of $55,000 today in terms of what you can buy. So she gets this money saved, she puts it under a mattress, and all these years later, it's still $10,000, right? But you can't buy as much with $10,000 now as you could in the 70s. So let's give another scenario. Let's say instead of grandma putting that $10,000 under the mattress, she invests that money in the S&P 500. Today, that $10,000 would be worth roughly 1 point. That's what I mean when I say building generational wealth. Okay, the 70s was not that long ago. $10,000, that's a good chunk of change, good chunk of money. But look at how much wealth that could have built in this amount of time. So that's just like a very simple example to show you how keeping it in a bank account or under your mattress or whatever, you really are losing a ton of value. And so the way that I've come to understand it now is that the stock market isn't gambling. It's buying tiny ownership in hundreds of America's biggest companies. And not just America, like you can do international as well. A while back, I had heard Jordan Belfort. So he was like the Wolf of Wall Street, from the movie. So the actual guy was on a podcast and they were asking him, okay, so what do you actually invest in? Like, is there anything that truly is a smart thing to do? Because so much of it, thanks to him, we see there's like a lot of scams and things like that. And he immediately said the only thing he invests in because it is the safest thing you can do is invest in the S&P 500 because historically it always goes up. There's literally studies on this and how historically it will always improve. And yes, there will be years where there's like a recession or something and there's a dip and it's really scary, but it always comes back up. And it turns out that Warren Buffett, who's like known as, the best investor next to everyone in Congress that freaking does like insider trading. But he says the same thing. He says that he recommends the average investor to own a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. Okay, so what is the S&P 500? It's basically the 500 largest publicly traded companies in America. That's all it is. And the list changes. If a company goes under or whatever, it's gonna shift, but it's always going to be the top 500 publicly traded companies. So when Apple wins, you win. When Amazon grows, you grow. When Microsoft grows, you grow. So over time, as businesses innovate and as they make more money, the stock market follows. And so if you are invested in that, your money will grow as well, along with those companies. And so historically, the S&P 500 has returned 10% annually before inflation over long periods. So 10%, like that is it's not as big as some of these other accounts, but it's still way better than a checking or a savings account where you're getting like 1%, if that. So yes, there's no guarantees. Yes, there's been, I don't even want to say crashes. I want to say corrections. That's what I've come to realize. Yes, there's recessions. Yes, there's wars and pandemics. But over the long run, the market always recovers and it always reaches new highs. So these corrections, what I learned from Warren Buffett is they happen every 10 years. And if you go back and you look historically at things that have caused dips, corrections, crashes in the stock market, it's roughly every 10 years. There is something that comes along and the market goes down. And what do the majority of people do? They panic. They see their 401k going lower and lower and lower, and they end up pulling their money out thinking, well, I don't want to lose all of it. So they pull it out when it's at the lowest and they take a major loss. All those gains, they lose. My dad actually was talking about this with like the 2008 recession. And everyone that took their money out in the 2008 recession, if they would have kept it in, they would have, like, the amount of money they would have made by now, insane. Like, it was the worst thing you could have possibly done to take your money out at that point in time. But that is what the majority of people do because, again, we're all conditioned with fear around money and no one's teaching us this stuff. And so we panic. And it ends up hurting us in the long run. And I am convinced, that saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? I really think that comes from stock market corrections because that is what happens. And you saw that again in COVID. You saw it in the recession in 2008. You saw it again in COVID where the rich got richer, the poor got poorer. Like the rich save up, they have cash flow, right? And when the market crashes or dips, they go in and they buy when everyone else is selling. And that's the big secret that the rest of the population doesn't know because we were never taught. And instead, we were conditioned around fear. And so they think of it as instead of a bad thing, like, oh, the market's crashing. Oh, it's a recession. Oh my God, are my 401ks is going down? They look at it as, okay, I know my money's going to come back because the market is going to come back around and have an all-time new high. But right now, this recession, instead of looking at it as, oh, it's a recession or, oh, it's a crash, they look at it as I can buy all these stocks on sale. They look at it as like the Nordstrom semi-annual sale, where they can just go nuts and buy. And that is how the rich get richer when the poor get poorer, because no one else has that mindset because, again, no one is teaching us this stuff. So Warren Buffett, for like 10 years, he'll build up his cash reserves and then just wait for the next correction and then buy while everybody else is selling. And historically, as long as the stock market has been around, it always rebounds and the S&P 500 always goes up, always. So if you know that, it can kind of put your mind at ease. And think about it, the S&P 500 is 500 companies. Like, you're not putting your whole life savings into one company. You're putting it into like not all your eggs in one basket. You're spreading it all evenly. And not only that, but you usually have a few different accounts that are slightly different. So you're spreading it out even more. So that's just to kind of understand what this is and why it's not as scary as we've been taught. So that brings me to lesson 2, which is time. So time is really the superpower behind the stock market and investing because of compound interest. And I really cannot do compound interest justice on this episode. What I recommend everyone do is go on YouTube and just type in like what is compound interest. There's so many videos that are really good at explaining how it's like a snowball effect. Like you start with a little bit of money, and if you just leave it alone and don't touch it and let it grow in one of these index funds, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because of compound interest. Okay. So I have a few examples to explain this to you so it makes sense. So as a parent, okay, you have a baby. And let's say from the time your baby is born until the time they're 18, you put money away in one of these S&P 500 accounts. And so we can assume an average 10% annual return, okay? So let's say from the time they're born, you put $50 every single month. $50, that's it. So the total amount that you've contributed over their 18 years is $10,800. At age 18 would be $30,000. So just if they decided to pull that money out and use it for college, that 10,800 grew to roughly 30,000, okay? And this is all like hypothetical. So if let's say they leave the money at 18, like you don't tell them this money's there so they don't spend it, and they leave it until they retire at 65. That money, that 10,800 grows to $390,000. Okay. Now let's say you keep investing. So after age 18, you're putting $50 a month in there, or you're teaching your kids, hey, keep putting $50 a month in this account until you're 65. That will turn to at age 65. $50 a month turns to 3.9 million in this example. So the total amount, by the way, that you actually contributed if you invested $50 until age 65 is 39,000. So less than like most cars, but it turns into 3.9 million by just leaving it alone and letting time and compound interest do its thing. Now let's say you take that same example, but it's $100 a month. So $100 a month, now you've invested 21,600. By age 18, that value is around 60,000. By age, you just leave it alone and quit investing at age 18, that 21,000 turns to $780,000. And if they kept investing $100 a month until they retire, that turns into $7.8 million. $7.8 million with $100 a month. And then the last example is $250 a month. By the time they're 18, that would be worth like $150,000. If they kept investing $250 a month until age 65, it would be $19.4 million. Like, that's insane. And what's crazy about that is you're not becoming a millionaire because you invested huge amounts. You became a millionaire because you started early. Like you started at birth. And most of us, well, we don't start until 18, but then even then, like then you're going to college and then you're living paycheck to paycheck. And so a lot of people don't even start investing until like their 30s or 40s, where had their parents known, hey, if I just put this amount away from the time they're born, just have it taken out of your paycheck and put directly into an account, my kid will be set. They will be a millionaire when they retire. Like that is how you build generational wealth, even if you have just a normal average job and you don't have a lot of extra money. It's all because you started early. And what will really piss you off is when you realize the money that we're forced to pay into for Social Security, it's just automatically taken out of our paychecks. If that money were instead invested in the S&P 500, we would all be millionaires at retirement, multi-millionaires. Every single one of us, even if you had a low paying job. Instead, you get Social Security, which is like a few $100, maybe a couple thousand a month if you're lucky. And they already say like they can't even keep that going. They can't even fund it. That's how badly our money is mismanaged in the government. So it's just insane. So don't rely on that. Instead, take these small amounts. And if you can do it for your kid, do it for yourself. And then if you can do it for your kids, that will grow over time so they don't end up in the same financial strain that we all face because no one ever taught us these things. Okay, so now let's go to lesson 3. This one I know it's going to ruffle some feathers, and that's fine. Like, this is just what I've learned and the way I look at it for my life. Take it or leave it. Like, this isn't financial advice. I've just radically changed the way that I look at things as I've broken up a lot of this conditioning. We really need to rethink what happens after high school. And I really think you should teach your kids this and let them come to their own conclusions. Okay. So right now, for my generation at least, and how it's been for quite some time, a few decades, but not for that long. Like, in the grand scheme of things, we've only had this mindset for a few decades. What's currently considered normal is that your kid goes to college at 18, whether they're smart, not smart, whatever their career, they're going to college, right? Everyone's pushed to the college path at 18, and it's expected that you're going to live at school. So 18, you're out of the house, you're living at school, and you're going to take out loans to pay for it. And so even if you've saved for your kids' college expenses are so extravagant. They've gone up so much that most people at some point end up taking out student loans. And by the time they graduate, they're six figures in debt before they ever even get into the real world and get a job. And a lot of times the debt they accumulate is with a degree that isn't even going to pay enough to pay that debt off. So now decades later, they're still paying off this debt from those few years after high school. And for the few that don't go to college, it's still this expectation in our society that they're going to move out and they're going to pay their own expenses or they're going to pay rent. And that also lands them in debt. Like, and think about this. Everyone's like, oh, it's good life experience for them. You're taking a child who's now all of a sudden considered an adult just because they reached an age, 18. And we all know at 18, they are not adults, okay? They are still kids. Your brain isn't even fully developed until like, what, 26, 24, or something like that. So you take these kids during the most volatile years in their life where they are transitioning from being a kid, a carefree kid, to a working adult with bills and responsibilities, and you throw them into the harsh world and it's like, figure it out, you're on your own. And I just think that is like so crazy. And I know why it was done. I mean, that wasn't the way for many years. And I think the reason it's done has to do with collecting taxes. And I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole, but I think it's messed up. Like, I think we need to really rethink this. Okay. So bear with me here, because I'm going to probably blow your mind with this. What if instead of that model, what if we said, hey, I want you to stay home for 3 years. I want you to live at home for 3 years till you're 21. Okay. 21 is a little more adultish, right? So from 18 to 21, you're going to live at home and we're going to treat you the same. So all the bills, your food, your clothing, like everything we pay for when you're a minor, we're going to continue paying for that until you're 21. Life is just going to continue as is for those few years. So you live at home, and the only stipulation is that you have to work full time. Okay. So you're going to live at home, but now you don't have school all day. So you're going to go and you're going to get a full-time job or start a business, whatever. Like, you're going to bring in income, but I'm not going to charge you rent. Although you could, if your kid's like not going along with this, you could charge rent and then do what I'm going to tell you in a second. So even if they worked a minimum wage job, that's around $30,000 a year. A minimum wage job working full time in the state of Florida, $30,000 a year, roughly. So as the parent, I'm covering your housing, your food, your insurance, life. You can keep $1,000 a month of your paycheck for spending. Like, if you want to go get the new cell phone, the new, whatever, you got $1,000 to go play with. The remainder, so around $17,000 a year, like, is going to go into an S&P 500 index fund. Okay. So after 3 years, from 18 to 21, just 3 short years, they've invested $51,000. So that $51,000 could be a down payment for a house. Like, look at how many people are in their late 30s saying they still can't afford a home. So that could be a down payment for a house. But the better option is, let's say they just leave it alone and they don't touch it. They don't add anything else to it. They just leave that $51,000 in the S&P 500 account and do not touch it. At age 65, that would grow to roughly $3.4 million. Like, that is insane. 3 years, $3.4 million. Now, I want to give a couple other scenarios. Let's say they go into a trade, or they're able to get like a slightly better job and they're making $40,000 a year, and they keep that $1,000 a month to themselves. So they end up investing $28,000 each year for those 3 years. So now you have $84,000. But if you keep it in until age 65, it is 5.6 million. And what's even crazier is like, let's say they continued investing at that level, it would be like 25 million. Like it would just be so insane. But look, we're just playing with small numbers here. So for 3 years of living at home with your parents and working full time, like, yes, that's hard, but so is going off on your own. You will be a multimillionaire by the time you retire. Okay. And with a $50,000 a year job, it's even more. It would be 114,000 that you saved, and that investment, if you never touched it until you're 65, would be $7.6 million. 3 years, you guys, 3 years. The 3 years that we as a society tell kids, go away to school, go get drunk, go party for 4 years in college so you can get a degree that's going to be replaced by AI anyways. Instead, if we say, no, you're going to live at home, you're going to work full time, but here, you got $1,000 to go play with every month. Those 3 years can completely change the financial future for your family. Like, just think about that. Like, why do we tell our kids to go to college in the first place? It's because we want them to get a good job. Why do we want them to get a good job? So that someday they can have the American dream. They can get married and own a home and like support their kids and then be able to save for a nice retirement someday. And we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, a lot of people with college degrees that are living paycheck to paycheck. They cannot afford a house, and they sure as hell don't have anything extra to put for retirement, because we've all been duped, okay, to go the college route and like you'll be fine. But if we just stop and use some critical thinking skills and we say, instead, what if we do something different for these 3 years? And then after those 3 years, like, they can go to college if they want to go to college. They'll probably have a better idea of what they want to do, and they'll have more life experience to take it a little more seriously. But 3 years can completely change their life and give them the financial security that we were taught we would get from going to college. That's completely not true in today's world, where you have money where you can either buy a house or you can retire with millions. And by the way, if you keep that money in this account, there are like situations where you can borrow against it, use it as leverage, take out a loan for buying a house. Like, you don't necessarily have to take that money out for like a down payment on a house. So you have so many more options, and all it takes is those 3 years. And we know how quickly 3 years goes by. It's been 6 years since COVID. Look at how fast that's gone by. And so that's the way I'm looking at it with my kids. And I just think we have to, at some point, question, is this path still working in today's world? And if you're not sure, go and find a college graduate, like a recent college graduate. Are they getting a job? What is their salary? And are they putting any money away? Are they, blowing it on the outrageous amount that rent is right now? So I know that's very different from what we're taught, but I'm telling you, 3 years can change their entire life. And this is also good for people who didn't start investing when their kid was born. Like, I didn't know anything about this. And so that sucks. But hey, here's another alternative. For 3 years, we could really just like buckle down and have them invest their money. And now they're set. And now I don't have to worry that, they're not going to be okay someday. So just a couple things I want to end with. We're conditioned as a society, all of us, we're conditioned to work hard and trade our time for money. There's lots of sacrifice and stress that goes into making money. That's normal. That's what we're conditioned. We're not conditioned how to build wealth. We're taught work really, 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 really hard so you can get a promotion and get a raise. And then with that raise, go buy the nicer house, the nicer car, get a bigger mortgage, instead of like, take that extra money and invest it. Own assets. Let that money work while you sleep. Become an owner instead of a consumer. And I really think we need to start shifting the paradigm. And the way we do that is with our kids. We can teach them differently. You don't have to do what every other parent at your kid's school is doing, which is sending their kid to college. Like, you can teach them different. You can teach them to become business owners. You can teach them to invest in those 3 years versus going and partying at school and getting $100,000 in debt. So at this point, if you're thinking, okay, I want to get a hold of my finances, I want to get into investing, but like, how do I even do that? I need some help. Where do I begin? Because it's very overwhelming, and I get that. And so I created I call it the Financial Glow Up GPT. And so this is basically my GPT that I created for myself to get all of this stuff organized. And I put in like the scenario that I want. I want my kids to be able to retire as millionaires. I want financial security for myself, like all of these things. And then it gave me a roadmap and like easy, simple steps that I could follow where I don't need a finance degree. I don't need to like pay someone to figure this out for me. Right. And so it helps you create this roadmap regardless of where you're starting. So you could be starting and you're in like a ton of debt and your goal is to get out of debt. Or maybe you have a lot of money and you're like me and like you've saved your money. You're not a big spender. You've done really good at saving your money, but you have no idea how to invest it. Or maybe you're like in between where you're not in a ton of debt, but you do like spend everything that you make. It doesn't matter your scenario. It helps you get comfortable with looking at your money, understanding where it's going, and then how to turn it around so you can build a better future for yourself and your family. So again, like you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to have a lot of people think like, well, I don't make enough money. The examples I gave you, we're talking a small amount. Like you probably spend more at Starbucks and Chipotle than you do in this one of these scenarios where you can invest money. So it's not as big or as daunting as you think. So anyhow, if you want that financial glow up GPT, I'll link it in the show notes. Or you can go to the lawofattractiontribe.com and there will be a little button that says financial glow up. Click that and it'll take you to it. So the thing I'll leave you with is it's not too late. No matter what age you are, it's not too late. And you're not behind, okay? Like I said, most adults right now with college degrees are in debt living paycheck to paycheck. And yes, it would have been great to know this stuff when we were 18, but the next best time to take action is today. Right now, because you don't want another year or another 5 years to go by and you look back and think, man, I should have started investing when I heard that podcast episode. Because you know that's what's going to happen if you don't take action. So don't let any more time pass you by. Start small, and even starting with those small amounts, it will add up over time thanks to the magic of compound interest. So I hope this episode inspires all of us to rebuild our finances and build generational wealth for our families so we can finally break the cycle of debt and scarcity. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.